States and the federal government are dismantling decades-old zoning laws that restricted where housing could be built. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Congress are all moving to override local control in favor of denser development. We examine why housing density has become a dominant policy issue. New Hampshire took the lead this month when Governor Kelly Ayotte signed 2 bills that fundamentally reshape how towns can regulate residential housing. House Bill 1588, which took effect July 1st, of multifamily residential buildings in commercial zones across the state. The law prohibits municipalities from requiring enclosed garages and caps parking at 1 space per unit. It also allows developers to seek attorney's fees if towns wrongly deny projects. Meanwhile, Massachusetts advanced its own housing legalization bill. The state Senate passed legislation that would allow 2-family homes on any residential lot, ending the state's single-family zoning requirement. When combined with a 2024 law legalizing accessory dwelling units, most Massachusetts residential lots could accommodate up to 3 units. Senate President Karen Spilka committed to go all in on housing as the state confronts a severe shortage. At the federal level, Congress enacted the 21st Century Road to Housing Act without presidential signature, introducing new mechanisms to encourage construction nationwide. The law expands what federal grants can fund, allows communities to reduce parking requirements and alter zoning rules, and creates financial penalties for jurisdictions that fail to meet housing production benchmarks. The push to reform zoning laws stems from a dramatic collapse in housing production and escalating affordability crises. Massachusetts data illustrates the severity. Monthly single-unit housing permits issued dropped from 1,700 in the 1980s to just 415 currently. Young adults aged 25 to 40 are leaving Massachusetts at elevated rates due to housing costs and availability. The state projects it must build 222,000 new units over the next decade to meet demand. Single-family zoning has artificially constrained supply for decades. Currently, only 38% of Massachusetts residential land allows duplexes by right. Additionally, 50% of single-family zoning provisions require minimum lot sizes of 1 acre or more, further limiting density. New Hampshire faces similar pressures. The state's approach reflects a national trend. Over the past 5 years, more than a dozen states have weakened single-family zoning rules or mandated density allowances in certain zones. The economics of density support this shift. Research shows mixed-use developments reduce per-unit infrastructure costs by an average of $21,000 compared to standalone developments. Mixed-use projects also generate 13% additional property tax revenue to cities and towns. The political consensus spans traditional divides, with housing shortages concerning both affordability advocates and market-driven interests. A coalition of state legislators and federal officials are advancing housing density measures despite local resistance. In New Hampshire, House Bill 1588 strips municipalities of discretionary authority over mixed-use projects that meet state standards. Brody Deshays, a legislative advocate at the New Hampshire Municipal Association, expressed concern about the scope of state intervention. By adding in this term by right, it closes that local option, those additional guardrails that municipalities establish to preserve communities, Deshays said. However, some towns have adapted strategically. Kingston voters approved a zoning code change requiring conditional use permits, limiting structures to 24 units, capping density at 8 units per acre, and mandating 50-foot landscape buffers with at least half evergreen trees. Derry set a 20 units per acre density ceiling. Nashua designed localized density limits for specific corridors. At the federal level, U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren championed the investor restriction provision, framing it as action against corporate real estate consolidation. This bill, for the first time ever, says to private equity, "You do not get to come into our neighborhoods, buy up all the housing, turn us into a nation of renters," Warren said. Ben Harold of the National Apartment Association backed the federal incentive structure, stating the government would provide a whole lot of carrots, a whole lot of support, and just a couple sticks in order to encourage these communities to start building more housing. The federal housing law enacted this month introduces a dual incentive system designed to pressure communities into approving more construction. The 139-page legislation restructures how federal housing grants reach local governments, fundamentally altering decades of federal policy. For the first time, communities can use a portion of federal community development block grant funding directly for new affordable housing construction, a use previously prohibited. The law permits up to 20% of a recipient community's total block grant allocation for construction. Simultaneously, it creates financial consequences for non-compliance. After a 3-year grace period, communities that fail to produce adequate housing will see their federal allocation cut by 10%. The law also establishes an innovation fund offering $200 million annually in competitive grants available through fiscal years 2027 to 2031 for communities that increase housing supply. Total federal community development block grant funding appropriated for fiscal year 2026 is $3.3 billion. Additionally, the law raises the cap on bank investment in public welfare activities from 15% to 20% of assets, an expansion estimated to unlock $4 billion to $4.5 billion in annual investment activity nationally. Cities and urban counties now possess broader flexibility to reduce parking requirements, revise minimum lot sizes and building height restrictions, streamline environmental reviews, create incentives for dense development, and eliminate restrictions on accessory dwelling units. Massachusetts is pursuing the broadest state-level zoning reform effort in the nation. The Senate's passage of duplex legalization represents a major attempt to address the housing crisis by dismantling single-family zoning statewide. Under the new provision, no city or town could require a special permit for 2-unit construction. The change would end Massachusetts' existing single-family zoning requirement, though duplex projects would still navigate local design and permitting processes equivalent to those for single-family homes. When combined with the 2024 Affordable Homes Act, which legalized accessory dwelling units statewide, the measure would allow most Massachusetts residential lots to accommodate up to 3 units. The accessory dwelling unit law permits units up to 900 square feet without requiring a special permit. Senator Michael Rodriguez emphasized the demographic stakes, noting that young adults aged 25 to 40 are leaving Massachusetts at elevated rates, and the state's current housing production cannot sustain population growth. The duplex provision now requires House approval, with the 2 chambers beginning negotiations on the final version of the Economic Development Bill. Massachusetts is not alone in this approach. Minnesota and Oregon enacted statewide duplex or multifamily zoning reforms in recent years, and major cities from Minneapolis to Austin have eliminated single-family zoning in urban cores. The Massachusetts approach differs in scope, applying broadly across residential areas rather than just urban neighborhoods. This has been a deep dive from the American Star News. Full reporting on this story and the rest of the week's coverage is at theamericanstarnews.com. Subscribe for the next briefing.